Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Jeffrey Epstein Show. I'm your host, Bobbycapucci, and this is Daily Drop number 388. So, last night during the live stream, I was talking about how there's a lull in the news usually, and then we end up getting a whole bunch of stuff dumped on top of us. Well, right off the bat, on Monday, to get things started off, we have some new information. A newly unsealed court filing in the Maxwell case lays out the blueprint for how the feds were following her, how they were pursuing her, and how they ultimately ended up arresting her. And the great Kate Bricklet from the Daily Beast has whipped up a nice article that puts it all into order and puts all of the pieces together and shows how the FBI pursued Maxwell and then how they ended up using the information that they compiled during this investigation, how they used that information to make the arrest. And it's always interesting to see how this stuff went down, and reading these arrest warrants is always interesting stuff once they're unsealed. So obviously I highly suggest you read the arrest warrant as well and check out the article, all of that stuff. But it is always a interesting look, shall we say, behind the curtain when you get to read an arrest warrant for yourself and see all of the things that went into it for Ghislaine Maxwell to finally be apprehended. And it's a long time coming, right? It's been decades that this lady has been accused of these crimes. It has been decades since this lady has somehow been able to duck and dodge and avoid any sort of responsibility for her role within Jeffrey Epstein's criminal enterprise. And now to see how it all came together and how the authorities put the pieces together to track her down, always an interesting read, always an interesting addition to the catalog, and like usual, it helps add some context, right? We know that Maxwell herself said that the reason that she was hiding and performing all sorts of spycraft, such as trying to hide her phone from being tapped or looked into by the authorities, and keeping a low profile. You know, the things you would do if you're on the lam and you don't want to be noticed by authorities. So it's interesting to see in the warrant the steps that she took to try and hide herself and cloak herself in shadow so that she didn't have to answer for these alleged crimes. And again, look, if this was an innocent person, do you really think that they would go through all of this stuff, jump through all of these hoops? If they weren't hiding something, if this was you, wouldn't you come out and be very passionate in defending yourself as opposed to running and hiding? It's not like Ghislaine Maxwell can't afford the best counsel in the world. It's not like she's not going to have the best lawyers in the world. If you have all of that money, all of that ability to hire the best people around when it comes to your defense, and you're innocent, how the hell could you possibly be worried about losing? She understands, though. She's not innocent, and her lawyers certainly understand, just like Andrew's lawyers understand, that he should not be opening his mouth. Ghislaine Maxwell's lawyers understand that they are not in a position of power here. They're not the ones calling the shots. They're not the ones that are going to control the narrative. And you see their attempts to do so, but thankfully, each time they've been slapped down by the court. And Ghislaine Maxwell's lawyers and her team and all of the people around her, they understand the deal. They understand just how much trouble that she is facing. And they also understand that they don't have the truth to work with. And if you don't have the truth in a case like this, and you have all of these witnesses against you, and you have evidence, circumstantial and otherwise, lined up against you, how do you possibly think that you're going to be victorious as you attempt to challenge this case in federal court? Now, mind you, in federal court, the United States government has an obscene conviction rate. I think it's hovering around like 98% of cases brought before a federal judge end in a conviction. And that's because the federal government has all the resources in the world to absolutely hamstring you. And they do it on a daily basis in every single federal court around this country. So I expect the same zeal, the same vigor, the same tenacity when pursuing Ghislaine Maxwell. And anything less than that is unacceptable. This article that we're going to dig into tonight is from the Daily Beast. The headline revealed how the FBI tracked down Ghislaine Maxwell. Authored by Kate Bricklet and Justin Rohrlich. So Kate and Justin, once again over at the Daily Beast, Kate and company doing great work. It's important to tell these stories. It's important to add the context. And that's what the legacy media doesn't do. Now, I'm sure they'll rerun this article from the Daily Beast. But as far as committing the resources to doing the groundwork and to digging into these stories, it's almost non-existent with the legacy media. Unless, of course, they think they can profit off of it and do a 4-part podcast or something like that. Then, hey, they're all in. They're all in for 2 weeks. They're like the politicians, right? They only care when it's election time. These people only care when they have a product to sell you. But thankfully, people like Kate and her associate here, Justin Rohrlich, who we got to give some props to for working on this as well. Props to you, Justin. We're lucky to have at least some reporters, some journalists who are, willing to dig a little bit deeper and peel back the layers of the onion and expose the meat of it for everybody. And even if it makes your eyes water, even if it's hard to look at, the story has to be told. Before the feds busted Ghislaine Maxwell, they tracked her to a New Hampshire hideaway, using her cell phone data according to a newly unsealed court filing. So, again, make sure you read that court filing. The hyperlink is in the article, and it's always a good idea to read that stuff. It gives you an insight, right, to what the authorities were doing and what their method was on how they were tracking down Maxwell and how they went about their business. So, again, it adds a lot of context and, it answers some questions, or at the very least, what it does is it provides the baseline to say, oh, yeah, okay, that's what I thought occurred. So she was hiding her phone from the authorities and not from the news, like she said. You know what I mean? So it gives you basically something that you can reference back to and look at an actual document and say, all right, so this is exactly what the government has on her and what they presented to the court. So anytime we can get these kind of court documents unsealed, I think it's a good idea. I think in the best interest of transparency and the best interest of justice in this case, I think that everything besides personal names and addresses and stuff like that should be unredacted in this case and be available for public consumption. The British socialite, co-conspirator, fellow child abuser, general all-around scuzzbag and bipedal serpent, and accused accomplice of sex trafficker, pedophile Jeffrey Epstein, had opened a mobile account under the name G-Max and used it to communicate with phones belonging to her rumored husband, Scott Borgerson, her sister, Isabel, and one of her lawyers, Laura Menninger, the document states. Now, remember, let's go back in time a little bit. And when Ghislaine Maxwell was being served by some of the survivors, remember her lawyer said, well, I can't find her. I don't even know where she is. and that was Menninger. Obviously, Menninger was lying. Was she lying to the court as well? Was she in contempt? Because she said she didn't know where to find Ghislaine Maxwell. And remember, the judge had to serve Maxwell via email because, according to Menninger, no one knew where she was. But yet now it comes out that she was in contact with Menninger, according to these court documents. Seems a little interesting to me that Menninger would go before the court and say that she has no idea where Maxwell is, but yet is one of the few numbers that's programmed into the burner phone that G Max is using. And G Max, really? What are her and Leon Black going to start a rap group behind bars? The revelation comes in an affidavit in support of an application for a search warrant filed by an FBI agent on July 1st, 2020, one day before Maxwell's arrest at a nearly $1 million secluded mansion in Bradford. The 59-year-old heiress, bipedal serpent, is charged with grooming 3 girls as young as 14 for Epstein in the mid-90s and faces trial this summer. Maxwell had been laying low in the tiny New England town since at least June. And remember, they've been there since they were chased out of Manchester by the Sea by the residents who didn't want to cohabitate with the bipedal serpent and your cousin from Boston, Scott Borgerson. So they were booted from Manchester by the Sea. People got together. They're like, look, it's bad enough that around these parts we have dirty Dershowitz running around playing in naked volleyball games, swimming around naked, and acting the fool. Now we got the bipedal serpent and your cousin from Boston hanging out up here too? Nope, we can't have it. We just can't have it. All of these scuzzballs commiserating. You gotta go. So they had to pack up and move out from Manchester by the Sea. And considering their reception there, well, Borgerson and the bipedal serpent figured might as well go get us a nice secluded spot in the middle of the woods where nobody's going to be any wiser to the scuzzbaggery that is on this property. So that's how they ended up in that fancy Bradford hideaway that they were in, all right, after they were chased out of Manchester by the Sea. Authorities previously obtained a search warrant in New York to receive GPS and historical cell site data for Maxwell's cell phone account, which had a northeastern Massachusetts area code within 1 square mile of her location. But the feds didn't know the particular New Hampshire building in which she lived. So they just had a basic idea. And again, it's kind of funny to think about, right? The feds didn't know exactly what building she was in. Come on. It's kind of hard for me to believe, considering the federal government can drop a missile in someone's window from 6,000 miles away. Why don't they just go and take a look at the NSA data, all the metadata? I'm sure that they could find her information there, considering they're spying on all of us anyway. That's why it always cracks me up when the FBI is like, well, we didn't know exactly where they were. It's like they're trying to posit themselves as like these great investigators. Well, even though we didn't know exactly what building it was, we had the general location, and because of our fantastic detective work, after 30 years, we finally made an arrest on Ghislaine Maxwell. I mean, really? You guys don't know exactly what building she's in? Stop it. The FBI does not know Maxwell's current location and accordingly requires the information sought in this application in order to locate and arrest Maxwell, the affidavit states. So, are we to believe that the FBI lost her and she was just, wandering around? They had no idea where she was? I don't know if I buy that, right? Then again, maybe they're just a bunch of bumbling fools. Maybe the FBI is really, truly just a bunch of bumbling fools at this point, and they don't know their ass from their elbow. I mean, that's basically what they're trying to tell us in many other situations. Now, here, at least they had the general vicinity, right? And then once they got the warrant, well, then they were able to use that data to track her down to exactly where she was. My problem here is, they really waited for this warrant? I mean, come on. That would be the first, all right? Let's just say, from what we have learned recently and what we know of the FBI in the past, let's just say that they don't actually follow the rules when they're looking to arrest somebody, okay? They have their own set of rules that they follow when they're chasing somebody to prosecute them and bring them to justice. And you think something like a search warrant is going to get in the way of the FBI? Stop it. That would mean they actually cared about the Constitution, folks. We know that's not the case. The New Hampshire warrant allowed the FBI to use an investigative device or devices capable of broadcasting signals that will be received by Maxwell's phone or receiving signals from nearby cellular devices, including Maxwell's device. In other words, they have some kind of program or malware or hacking device that they use to track Maxwell's phone. And they had to pull a warrant in order to use this device according to this report. Now, that is how it should work, right? And I think that it's important for the FBI to respect people's rights. And even people like the bipedal serpent, she has rights that are afforded to her under the Constitution. So I'm honestly shocked that they would pull a warrant, because we know how the FBI goes about things for the most part. And if they want you, something silly like a warrant to look at your communications is certainly not going to stop them. Such a device may function in some respects like a cellular tower, except that it will not be connected to the cellular network and cannot be used by a cell phone to communicate with others, the affidavit states, adding that the device would not intercept her phone calls, texts, and other electronic communications and data. So basically, what they're saying is this is collecting metadata. Just the metadata for her location. That's what they pulled the warrant for, not for the actual communications. Such a device may function. These details seem to indicate that the FBI used a Stingray device, also known as an IMSI catcher, to nab Maxwell. The portable equipment, which can fit inside a briefcase, simulates a cell tower and forces mobile phones in the immediate vicinity to connect to it instead of the actual tower. Once it connects, the Stingray captures the phone's exact location and the registered user's identifying information. This is the kind of stuff that we're dealing with technology these days, folks. And if anybody has the capability to track you and find out exactly where you are if they want, it most certainly is the FBI. And this is what Edward Snowden was telling everybody about, basically. About the metadata capture, the invasions of privacy that was occurring by the intelligence services, namely the NSA. And the law enforcement uses those same methods, but they have to pull a warrant to use those methods, right? Whereas the NSA was just collecting all the metadata from everything you were sending. Emails, text, every keystroke, basically. So this is a version of that kind of technology, but more targeted, more geared towards finding a specific person and their location. After Epstein died in his Manhattan jail cell in August 2019, the media worked to ferret out Maxwell's whereabouts. The Daily Mail reported the British heiress, bipedal serpent, and decades-long confidant of Epstein, co-conspirator, fellow child abuser, and general all-around scuzzbag, was holed up in Massachusetts with tech CEO Scott Borgerson, then described as her boyfriend. And again, props to the Daily Mail. The Daily Mail and the Sun were steadfast tracking down Maxwell and looking into leads and pursuing this case, right along with the Daily Beast. The Daily Mail, they provided their writers some resources, and they let them chase down the story. And the Daily Mail has unearthed a lot of good things and a lot of good leads in this story. So, once again, got to give them props for their work, because they were all over the Scott Borgerson in Manchester by the Sea. There's no doubt about that. The affidavit indicates Maxwell shared a joint bank account with Borgerson and that her Amazon account sent him multiple packages within approximately the last year. According to the document, the last communication between Maxwell's device and Borgerson's phone occurred in or around March of 2020. So, March of 2020, huh? Quite some time ago. Almost a year ago, in fact. Does that sound like a loving couple who is missing each other, who needs to be in contact with each other, and who is so in love that the stepchildren are just broken up about the fact that the bipedal serpent is no longer around to yell and scream at them and tell them they can't touch the walls or have anything to drink with dinner or whatever the hell sort of crazy rules this lady lives by? You mean to tell me that loving couple hasn't been in contact since March 20th, huh? I mean, March of 2020. Loving couple. So in love that she wouldn't leave, that he'd be the ties that bind. But they haven't talked since March. Nobody's buying their story, okay? Certainly not me. I'm certainly not buying it. And I know that the masses of you who were involved in the live stream last night aren't buying it. That's for sure. Ghislaine Maxwell is a straight-up pathological liar, in my estimation. And everything that comes out of her mouth is geared towards manipulating something down the road. So, forgive me if I don't believe anything that her or her legal team bring to the table. Unless it's backed up by tangible, provable evidence, I don't believe a word this lady says. When Maxwell unsuccessfully tried for a second time to get bail in December, her husband, widely reported to be Borgerson, penned a letter to the court describing her as a wonderful and loving person who he believes had nothing to do with Epstein's crimes. Well, that's okay. That's great, Scott, that you believe that. That you believe she had nothing to do with Epstein's crimes. That makes you a moron, okay? That makes you an idiot. That makes you an absolute dolt. All this evidence is just fabricated. It's all false, Scott Borgerson. All of this evidence is made up. All of these girls from Palm Beach got together and decided that this is the route they were going to go when they were 14, 15, and 16 years old. Yeah, let's get together. We're going to come up with this huge plot to get rid of Jeffrey Epstein. Because that's what 14, 15, and 16-year-olds do. In fact, these kids would have never even come forward if the ball didn't start rolling with that first girl. So please, give me a break about Ghislaine Maxwell being innocent. At this point, she's going to have to prove that in a court of law. All right? Because from the circumstantial evidence and the allegations made against her by the survivors who have came out in public and the ones who have not come out in public, well, it's the word of a pathological lying bipedal serpent against the word of dozens and dozens of survivors. Maxwell purchased her Bradford property in all cash in December 2019. If that is not a Ginzaloon move to make, if that is not a mafioso kind of move to make, yeah, I'm going to show up, I got an all-cash purchase over here. I mean, Ghislaine Maxwell is the epitome of absolute working behind the scenes. Everything she does is calculated and shrouded in secrecy, and she is the epitome of the kind of person we discuss on a regular basis that is manipulating the financial system and is just generally being a stain on the human population. According to previous reports, the real estate agent for the luxury home told the FBI the buyers had British accents and introduced themselves as Scott and Janet Marshall. It's unclear if Scott was Scott Borgerson. Oh, I mean, Occam's razor says that's the case. I'm guessing it was. I mean, was he pulling the fake British accent? Probably. Or maybe it was the security guard that they had hired, the British cat. Who knows? The fact of the matter is that this property was purchased with the intent of Ghislaine Maxwell trying to ride this all out. The unsealed affidavit appears to confirm Borgerson is Maxwell's husband. In an exhibit filed with Maxwell's renewed motion for bail last month, independent accountants reviewing her finances stated Ghislaine Maxwell married her spouse in 2016 and commenced filing joint U.S. tax returns from the 2016 tax year until today. In 2016, Ghislaine Maxwell transferred the majority of her assets into a trust controlled by her spouse. And why do you think she did that, folks? Do you think she just did that because it was just, we're doing some house cleaning, we're going to do some money management and moving? Or was it to protect her fortune from being sued by the survivors? And you have to remember who we're dealing with. We're talking about the bipedal serpent. There is zero chance that she just moved this money over for no reason. We know that her, Epstein, and this whole organization was always thinking 3 moves ahead. They might not have been good people, right? But they were shrewd, and they knew how to play this game. And they knew how to operate in the shadows. And Ghislaine Maxwell, well, she was top dog when it came to that. The accountants indicated Maxwell and her unidentified spouse had a net worth of approximately $22.5 million. Meanwhile, a memorandum in support of Maxwell's latest bail application said if Miss Maxwell were to violate her bail conditions, which she has no intention of doing, she would be leaving her spouse with virtually nothing. The filing added that Maxwell sold her New York apartment in 2015 to live with her spouse. Oh boy, I bet you that was just such a comfy, cozy situation. Can you imagine what those dinner conversations must have been like? How in the hell do you crawl into bed next to the bipedal serpent every night? How do you look at her before bed every night and not have the worst vivid nightmares in the history of the world? It is just beyond me. And then add to that, leaving your children? I'm not going to, the wife situation, who knows what the dynamic was between him and his wife, right? I don't know. But from what we have seen and what we have heard, Scott Borgerson was an asshole. So his wife is probably better off that he's not with her anymore. But the way he went about it, that's a scumbag's operation right there. That's the way a scumbag operates himself, not a real man. A real man takes care of their children. A real man shields their children from any kind of controversy or any kind of nonsense, if at all possible. You think these kids aren't hearing shit at school? We know how cruel children are to each other. These kids show up at school and hey, so your dad's married to Ghislaine Maxwell, huh? What's it like living with a child molester? Kids are going to go hard in the paint. And that's Scott Borgerson's fault. He should have never, ever, ever, ever gone to bed, literally and figuratively, with this bipedal serpent. And because of his decisions, and because of his absolute, utter disregard for his loved ones, now they all have to face the fallout from the Epstein nuclear bomb that has just exploded in their midst. If you'd like to contact me, you can do that at Bobbycapucci@protonmail.com. That's BOBBYCAPUCCI at protonmail.com. You can also find me on Twitter at BOBBY_CAPUCCI. All of the links that go with this episode can be found in the description box. All right, folks, I'll be back tomorrow morning, and we'll start the whole entire thing up again. Enjoy your Monday night, folks.